everybody, welcome to Steelers Weekly presented by Geico. I am Missi Matthews. It is time now to get you ready for the Steelers' upcoming game. Let's introduce you to our panel this week so we can discuss the Week 5 matchup of the Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Bob Labriola is back, Steelers.com. Also joining us, former Steelers outside linebacker Arthur Moats and Matt Williamson, kind enough to join us once again. You can hear him on DVE and Steelers Nation Radio. So guys, we got to step back just a little bit. No matchup show last week, an unexpected bye week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have tons of fan questions that we are going to use throughout the entire show. So let's get to our first one. It is from Richard, and it is about this very topic so that you guys can weigh in. Richard wants to know, will the Steelers benefit from a bye week where they still trained, or will it break the momentum? The break in momentum prove costly. Labs, your take on the unexpected bye week.
I see no advantages of the bye week falling as it did for the Steelers in terms of where on the schedule, and also the way that it fell on them, kind of like a big gigantic rock on their head sometime Thursday afternoon. I understand Mike Tomlin's approach to this. He needs to say the things that he said about it and handle it the best that they could, and try and put lipstick on the pig after it's over and say, we were able to use the time to get some advanced preparation on the Titans. We're going to play them later, blah, 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 blah. But no, I see absolutely nothing good about that, nothing to be gained from it. And, if anything, I do see it as a momentum breaker. As opposed to anything else. I don't know that it definitely will be that, but if it has any impact, I would perceive it to be negative.
Okay, Arthur, give us the player perspective. You think it is going to be right in the middle of the season? Just kidding. It's actually week 4. What do you think the guys are thinking in the locker room?
Well, I look at it a couple of ways from a player's perspective. Number one, if you're looking from the offensive side, you're talking about the receiver position. You say, well, look, Deontay Johnson, unexpected bye week, but hey, he's able to come out of the concussion protocol. From a player perspective, that's probably the only positive you're getting out of it, because what you typically do on a bye week is self-scout. That's typically the time where you really get a chance to say, hey, we're not doing these things well, we're doing these other things well. Let's really hone in and try to figure out how we can get this up to speed and to the level that we expect here. But when you're game planning for a team, that's not the same as self-scouting during a bye week. And the Steelers were doing that up until Thursday at whatever time the NFL made the ruling about the game being postponed. So I just don't see them really being able to take full advantage of that. And from a player's perspective, that would be the biggest thing I'll be thinking of, is just, man, we really missed the opportunity to correct a lot of our internal issues right now.
Now, Matt, Coach Tomlin has always said there's never a bye week he's met that he didn't like. As Lab said, he said the things that we would expect from him about having to adjust on the fly. Do you like the fact the Steelers, or do you not like the fact the Steelers had their bye week moved to earlier in the season?
No, I agree with both these guys, and particularly Labs, that there was nothing really positive that comes out of it. You'd much rather have it in the middle of the year. You now have a lot of a lot of road games in your future. And it looks like they're going to get more and more fans that you're going to have to deal with, as opposed to knocking those out earlier in the year. The schedule change doesn't help you there. And like Arthur said, Coach Tomlin's been doing this a very long time, and he's great at what he does, and he'll adjust fine, or as well as any coach in the league. But he has a bye week plan that he uses every year, and now that got thrown out because, sure, they practiced early in the week, like Arthur said, but they practiced for the Titans. They didn't practice with their bye week schedule. Help the young guys work on their own things, fundamentals of how they would have handled it usually. So now you don't get that at all.
All right, guys, let's talk about this matchup for Sunday, 1 o'clock here at Heinz Field against the Philadelphia Eagles. They won on Sunday Night Football in San Francisco against the 49ers. They are 1-2-1. And our first question is about defense coming from our fans. This one is from Heather. She said both D-lines, meaning the Steelers and Eagles, are pretty good. Which team do you think has the better D-line? Labs, your take.
Well, I mean, the better defensive line for the Steelers, do we get to count Bud Dupree and T.J. Watt or not?
Yes,
Because
sure.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to say the Steelers, and especially in this particular game, because all these games, every NFL game every week is, about the matchups. And in this particular game, you have, in my opinion, two of the premier outside pass rushers in football against a couple of Eagles offensive tackles who are either debilitated somewhat by injury or filling in for the starter who's on injured reserve, as is the case at left tackle where Jason Peters is on IR, Jordan Mailata is the starting left tackle now. Lane Johnson's injury is one that the Eagles have admitted is going to limit him for the next few weeks, maybe a month. And so he's splitting time with a guy named Jack Driscoll, a fourth-round pick rookie from Auburn. And so now you have T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree going against the guy that the Eagles at left tackle probably hoped wouldn't play at all. And now you have a situation at right tackle where your starter is debilitated by injury, splitting time with a rookie. So based on those matchups, I'll stick with the Steelers.
Okay, Arthur, the Eagles have obviously played 4 games. The Steelers only played 3. The Eagles lead the league with 17 sacks. The Steelers, of course, have 15. Who are you taking in terms of best defensive front in this game?
And I'm definitely rolling with the Steelers solely because of what Lab said in terms of the matchup element of it. When you look at how banged up that Eagles offensive line is compared to this Steelers D in terms of including Bud and TJ as part of that front D line and things like that, that is a drastic mismatch, a huge advantage for the Steelers. Whereas when we're looking at the Eagles front, without a doubt, they are very talented up front. I think that they do a great job of creating pressure both outside and inside. And when you look at the amount of guys that have sacks for that team, it's multiple guys because of that. A guy like Brandon Graham with 3 sacks, you still got Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave came back and had a sack last week. When you're seeing a team that's able to create pressure from inside and outside, they create a ton of issues. But the Steelers are coming off one of their better performances from an offensive line standpoint in their last game against the Texans. So I'm anticipating them continuing to bring that momentum into this game, but this is going to be their biggest test to date in terms of protecting against that Eagles front.
All right, Matt, in terms of Javon Hargrave, who Arthur mentioned, what have you seen from him? I know he was dealing with an injury earlier, a former Steeler, and also who do you give the best D-line to on Sunday?
Yeah, even matchups aside and who's going to try to block these folks, I mean, the Steelers' front line on defense is the best in the league. So it gets the nod over all 31, whoever you want to line up against them. But I do think the Eagles are very strong here. It's what they do best, and they don't do a lot well right now. It's a big reason they won this past week. And the key with them, kind of like Arthur was saying, they have some star power in Fletcher Cox. Brandon Graham's been a constant for them. And they also have great depth. I mean, they come about 8 deep, defensive tackle and Josh Sweat. Derek Barnett's a former first-round pick. Everyone around here is familiar with what Javon did as a Steeler, and very impressive. He looks the same there, but he can be in a rotation with those guys because Malik Jackson will come in, Hassan Ridgeway will come in. So they go about 8 deep, and that's kind of the beauty of that line.
Don't go anywhere. There's plenty more when Steelers Weekly, presented by Geico, returns. Welcome back, everyone. Steelers Weekly, presented by Geico, continues.
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Miles Sanders from Woodland Hills. He's developed into a quality all situations running back, one that runs well inside, one that runs well on the perimeter. He's included in their passing game as well. We got to work to minimize his impact on the game. That is always our agenda, to neutralize the opponent's featured runner. But I think it's doubly important in this circumstance because of the number of people that they're missing on the perimeter.
Guys, you heard Coach Tomlin there talking about Woody High product Miles Sanders. You know I'm a Pitt girl. I'm going to have to turn this into Pitt versus Penn State. That's why we're going to talk about Sanders and also James Conner. Both guys have played in just 3 games due to an injury. Miles Sanders missed their first game. And when you talk about the feature runners, and Matt, you mentioned sometimes the Eagles are not doing too many things well, but Coach mentioned it, not having a lot of their weapons in terms of pass catchers. They are trying to rely on him, and when you look at the stats, James Conner, 40 attempts, rushing 224 yards, a 5.6 average, 2 touchdowns. Sanders, 51 for 236, 4.6 average, and 1 touchdown. Labs, I'll start with you. What do you make of what these guys can do to impact the game on Sunday?
Well, the thing about, I'll start with James Conner. The thing, and you mentioned it, Missy, a little bit. The thing with James Conner is you always have to add the qualifier when healthy. When he's healthy, James Conner, I think, is a good fit for the Steelers offense. He is a guy who can handle a lot of different situations, everything from, running the ball on first down to protecting Ben Roethlisberger when necessary, on third downs. And to me, that's a critical element for any running back who wants to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because if you can't help me protect my quarterback, I can't have you on the field. And so when healthy, James Conner, I think, checks all of the boxes. Maybe he's not an all-pro candidate, but he fits enough of the needs of this particular team, this particular season, for me to say that I'll take him. Miles Sanders, I really don't know that much about him. We don't see the Eagles that often, but maybe he's better than James Conner from a head-to-head analysis. But as I said, James Conner checks all the boxes that the Steelers need checked when healthy.
Sorry, Labs, didn't mean to step on you there. Arthur, are you surprised that Miles Sanders isn't being used as much in the passing game for the Eagles, given their injuries and what they're dealing with on that end?
Yeah, I really am surprised. Watching them a little bit on tape, you can see when they do utilize him, he creates mismatch. He's very shifty. He does a really good job in terms of when the ball's in his hand of making something positive happen. But I just think right now their biggest issue is with that O-line not protected the way it needs to protect. Carson Wentz it looks like he's doing just too much. And in terms of, instead of just taking the short dump off pass to Miles Sanders, he's trying to stretch it a little bit more downfield and putting himself in more compromising positions, which has led to them having 9 turnovers, I think it is, through these first couple of games. So with me, man, when I think of Miles Sanders, I just think they need to utilize him more because of those injuries. But for some reason, they're just not. And I think as long as they continue to do that, especially this week, that bodes really well for the Steelers defense.
Matt, we saw the return of Dave DeCastro helping the Steelers have another 100-yard rusher in James Conner against the Texans in Week 3. Coach Tomlin said this about the Eagles' defensive front. They're penetrators, they're disruptors, and they pick off the pullers. How much will it be important for the Steelers trying to establish the run game on Sunday?
I think it'll be important. I mean, this is traditionally a very good run-defending Eagles defense. This year, a little less because they're often losing as well, so the numbers don't bear it out. They're also very, very weak at linebacker. It's about as bad a group of linebackers you're going to see. But the front, as we mentioned already, is really good. And a little nugget, a little stat I have here is when you take the Steelers' average rushing play minus what they allow on defense, they're the best in the league in terms of run ratio in the entire league. And I expect that to keep up in this game. Take a little of the pressure off Ben and that big pass rush that they do bring. But you didn't ask me about Miles Sanders, but I do think he is an exceptional talent, and he's someone to fear in this game.
All right, well,
No,
Labs
Matt,
will tell you. Sorry, go ahead, Arthur.
Oh, I was going to say, Matt, you're absolutely right in terms of, well, actually both of those scenarios with Miles Sanders, but what's held to Pitt, where we're not going with Penn State. We're not doing that, all right? But but when we're talking about that Eagles front, though, man, under Jim Schwartz, that's what they love to do, that crazy attacking, very aggressive, but at times that they can get caught in terms of some of the misdirection stuff. And we saw the Niners have a little bit of success because of that. So I do think that with the way Matt Canada has been running this offense thus far, with some of the off-tempo style runs and some of the counter stuff that we saw the Steelers have a lot of success with last week, I think that could still be very prevalent and very productive again this week against them because of how aggressive they play up front.
Steelers Weekly is presented by Geico, where 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on your car insurance. All right, Matt, since I feel like you were a little left out of that first question, you're going to get to go first this time. So let's get to this question from Steven. He wants to know over under 7.5 sacks for the Steelers on Sunday. Matt, as I said, you get to go first this time.
Huge number, obviously a huge number, but the matchups are really in their favor. I go back to this a lot. Very rarely last year did you get to see the Steelers playing with a lead and everyone in the stadium knew they were going to throw and just pinning their ears back and just teeing off on quarterbacks. That could be the fourth quarter of this game. And I'm going to go over the Eagles offense. When you combine sacks and turnovers, by far the worst offense in the league. So not a good recipe for them.
All right, Arthur, we'll keep you in the middle. What are you taking, the over or the under 7.5 sacks?
I'm going to take the over. Trust me, 7.5 is definitely hard, but the reason why I think the over in this scenario is, number one, it's not even close in terms of the advantage the Steelers D-line has against this makeshift Eagles offensive line. But more importantly, when you start talking about the skill position players, outside of Zach Ertz, they are beat up at wide receiver. A ton of their players, whether they were drafted, came through free agency or whatever, they're not available. You have Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey who are still dealing with injuries. Deshaun dealing with the hamstring. So I think that even if he does play, he's going to be limited at best because he's a speed receiver, and you can't run fast if your hamstring isn't up to par. So when I'm looking at all those things and on tape, watching Carson Wentz continue to hold the ball, continue to try to make these just extended plays, but instead of them working out well for him, they turn into disasters. I just think that that's a recipe for success for these Steelers in terms of getting after the quarterback. And that's before we even talk about Mike Hilton being added into that on the occasional blitz.
All right, Labs, are you going over with Matt and Arthur? Or are you taking the under?
I'm going to take the under only because over 7.5 means it has to be at least 8. 8 sacks for a team in a game is a lot. I mean, there just aren't a lot of NFL games where one team has 8 or more sacks. And so, percentages are with the under. And so I'm going to go with that. Plus, I think the fact that, the Eagles understand what they are and who they are right now. And so I believe that there is going to be a concerted effort made to try and impress upon Carson Wentz, that he's their franchise quarterback, and they want to try and protect him if they can't actually block for him, to do some things that kind of reduce the number of hits that he takes. And so I'm going to go under, but I do think that the Steelers' pressure on him is going to be a significant factor in this game.
All right, guys, we have time for just one more break. We will be right back when the matchup show continues. Welcome back, everybody. It is time now for our keys to the game presented by your neighborhood Ford store. All right, guys, let's jump right into it. Labs, what is your key to the game for Steelers versus Eagles?
Well, Mike Tomlin talks a lot about it, especially early in the season. And even though this is technically, or would have been, the Steelers' 5th game, I still consider it early in this season because of the no preseason games and all of that stuff. So I'm going to say the key for the Steelers on Sunday against the Eagles is to be a difficult team to beat. Don't make it easy on the Eagles with, any kind of foolishness, turnovers, settling for red zone field goals, lots of penalties, especially on third downs that extend possessions, for the opponent. If the Steelers make themselves difficult to beat, I don't think the Eagles can do it.
Okay, Arthur, what are you picking for your key for this Battle of PA matchup?
Well, first off, before I give my key, I just wanted to let you know I'm very upset with you, Missy. You've given Labs the opportunity to go first. Matt got the opportunity to go first. I'm over here like, is it my go? Is it my name begins with A? Like, what are we doing here? But it's all good. It's
You're
all
right.
good.
You're right. You should have went first for keys. That is my bad. That's my fault.
It's all good. But for me, man, I think the key to victory is the Steelers O-line protected against that Eagles D-line. We highlighted about the Eagles and how they've been able to create pressure from both the inside and outside. Matt talked about how deep they are as well in terms of having a 7 or 8 man legit rotation. When I'm looking at this matchup, I feel like that's the biggest concern in terms of how the Eagles could have one of those type of impact plays and kind of change the momentum of the game. But if the O-line, the Steelers O-line can just protect and keep Ben upright, that Eagles secondary is banged up, and I don't think that they can handle what the Steelers can do from a passing attack, especially when you look at the tight end matchup and Eric Ebron against their linebackers or what's left of their linebacker core. I just feel like it has to start up front. They have to protect against those guys because that's the only thing that stands out in terms of the Eagles being able to have some type of success.
All right. I was told, actually, Arthur, it was our producer's fault that I was going in that order. So you can blame Jordan on that. All right, Matt, give us your key to the game.
I'm going to piggyback off Labs a little bit here, too. And this goes back to that Niners-Eagles game last week where, yes, the Eagles left there with a win, but I really thought watching that game a couple times that the Niners lost the game more than the Eagles won it. The Eagles' D-line was very good. But San Francisco's quarterback, Nick Mullins, was basically a double agent working for the Eagles. I mean, he couldn't have hurt his team more. And I don't think the Steelers are going to fall into that type of trap by any means. But that's a way you could lose a game like this, like Labs mentioned. And I think if you can run the ball and not let Miles Sanders get out of control, you should be in good shape.
All right, and don't forget, guys, this will be the first game this season, not just at home. The Steelers will be playing in front of a limited number of fans. 5,500 Steelers fans will be here, so we will see what that does to the atmosphere. It has been a little weird the past 2 home games, so excited about that. Thank you to Arthur, Labs, and Moat for joining me today on the Matchup Show. We'll see you guys again next week.